Shana Tova, it's so good to see everyone here. The medical committee of the synagogue has been very strict, but they did say that Cantor and I could be tested for COVID. The test came back negative, and that for small parts of the service we could be without our masks. So for this part of the service, I'm going to be without a mask. There were times over the last 6 months when I felt like I was drowning. Too much information, too many decisions, too much change. Waves of feelings that don't have names washed over me as I, along with each one of you, tried to navigate this pandemic. We had to figure out what was safe and what was not. We cared for those who were ill. Over and over, too many times, we mourned those who died. And just as we came up for air, we were reminded of the brutal reality of our politics, the persistence of anti-Semitism, the tragic costs of racial justice, the shock of losing jobs and wildfires, emotional struggles that did not disappear just because there was a pandemic, and the emotional losses that come from missing family who are far away, family who are close by but you just can't spend time, school, summer camp. And in these days where masks save lives, we yearned to actually see another person smiling at us. But we are here, and despite the raging waters, we found a way to float. And tonight we welcome Rosh Hashana, a new year with gratitude. There is a debate in the Talmud about whether one must say Shechianu on Rosh Hashanah or not. You can, you may, but the question is, must you? It's discussed in the Talmud, discussed in rabbinic literature, but I think that this year it is a prayer that we must say. Offering thanks to the one who has kept us alive and sustained us. Baruch Atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech olam, shechianu, v'kiyamanu, v'gianu lazman hazeh. I really wanted this moment with all of you, the whole congregation. Over the next 2 days, our synagogue will host 8 services every morning with up to 50 people in each service. More people will attend shofar blowings, and many of you, as a bulwark against loneliness, will participate in live stream services in your homes. And even though we observe this holiday in different places and in different ways before the holiday began, I wanted everyone to be together. Together in as much as you can be together in this way. And we'll do it again exactly the same way before Kol Nidre. I wanted these few minutes for all of us to feel a little less alone, so that I could say, I miss you. And I'm buoyed by the concern that you have shown for our community and for me. Tonight, as we begin Rosh Hashanah, I want to reflect with you on a question. What keeps you afloat when times are hard? There's an evocative story in the Talmud about this. Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Akiva are coming back from boat from someplace to Israel. They're on separate boats, and Rabbi Gamliel sees the boat where Rabbi Akiva is fall apart in the water. It gets broken into pieces, shattered. And reports Rabbi Gamliel, I was grieved at thinking about this Torah scholar who was on board. Rabbi Gamliel saw the unthinkable. He saw the sea swallowing his dear friend and student. But then the Talmud cuts away from the grieving Rabban Gamliel to a later scene where Rabbi Akiva and Rabban Gamliel are studying together. Rabban Gamliel, thinking that Rabbi Akiva succumbed to the turbulent waters, asks, my son, who brought you up from the water? Rabbi Akiva said, a plank from the boat came to me, and I nodded my head before each and every wave that came over my head. Daf shel sfina nizdamen li, v'chol gal v'gal shaba alai, na'aneti lo roshi. This story, I think, speaks as a metaphor for our times. On the one hand, it recognizes that there are forces that we cannot control in the world. The waves keep coming, and we don't know when or if we'll make it to shore. Sometimes the waves that we expect to be really big waves peter out before they get to us, and they turn into nothing. And sometimes the ones that seem like nothing come over us in a way that we could not have expected. Sometimes we're thrown lifelines when we least expect it. And the truth is that planks don't come with big signs that say, I am here to save you, grab on to me. Sometimes a plank, whether it's a person or an idea or a calling or a prayer or a text or a ritual, those things float into our lives and we don't even notice. We don't notice that that's the thing that can save us. I appreciate how Rabbi Akiva in the story exhibits agency. When the plank floats by, he grabs it. And then he develops an evocative strategy. He nods his head at every wave. Maybe he ducked his head so that the water wouldn't knock him off the plank. Dr. Malila Hellner Eshed reads this as a bow of acceptance. I accept the reality of my situation. I read it a little differently. I read it as, I'm ready for you, wave. Ready to rise and fall with the churning of the ocean. I will be patient and let this tide take me to shore. It's a recognition that the very same waves that threaten can inexorably bring us home. John Kabat-Zinn said, you can't stop the waves, but you can learn to surf. And Rabbi Akiva, if you will, is the first surfer dude, calmly waiting to catch his wave. When it's just you and the plank and the waves, you understand the fragility of life. Rosh Hashana attempts to instill this, to invoke this feeling every year. Scales that tip this way and that, a book of life that God seals with our deeds, going to the water and casting away our sins, and of course, who by fire and who by water, mi va'esh mi v'mayim, who by earthquake and who by plague, mi v'ra'am umi b'magefa. All this is meant to focus us, to help us understand what is important, and I think that this year, we all get it. We all get that life is fragile. So what's your plank? What do you do when the waves come? How will you get to shore? How will we get to shore? In March, I couldn't answer any of these questions. As we were closing the shul, I came to the sanctuary to get my talit and to clean up under the podium. And then I sat down right there and I wept. Intellectually, I knew that we were doing the right thing, the safe thing, but emotionally, how can a rabbi close down a shul? How can a community walk away from the beating heart at its center? I felt lost. A few days after the shul closed, a friend called, and when he asked, "How are you?" I could barely speak. There were so many emotions welling up. I was quiet for a bit, and he allowed me that. And then we talked for a few minutes and made a plan to check in the next day. It was a simple call, but I knew then that what would get me through all of this would be relationships with my family, my friends, with each one of you. I experience God in the relationships that I have with people, in watching you triumph and overcome and reach out and support one another. My plank is people. In the story from the Talmud, I love that Rabbi Gamliel was thinking about his student. There is an invisible cord that connects them. There's an invisible cord that connects us. And maybe part of what kept Rabbi Akiva afloat was his relationship with his teacher. It's almost as if he knew that Rabbi Gamliel, his teacher, would miss their discussions. And maybe that contributed a little bit to his determination to hold on. Maybe the importance of relationships like this one was on his mind when Rabbi Akiva would state that the greatest principle found in the Torah is you should love your friend as yourself. Ze klal gadol. This is the most important rule, he said. The plank, the waves, and this relationship in a delicate balance are what saved him. And I think that relationships can save us as well. Think about a moment in the past few months when you felt like it was too much. Was there someone there for you? Someone who offered help or just listened? It could be a family member or a friend or a stranger. Take a few minutes, a few seconds to picture that person. How did they support you? What did it feel like to be supported by that person? Now take a second and offer that person a silent thank you for holding you through these waves. Building relationships has been the big idea behind our shul programming since the beginning of the pandemic. Our staff got together and we realized that that is what this community is about. It's about relationships. And so early on we started emunah groups. These groups, heterogeneous groups of members of the congregation, 7 people or families or units, who all got together online or on phone or in text message or in WhatsApp just to check in with each other once a week. That was their only rule, was you had to check in once a week. One person said, at a time when everything in my world was getting smaller, I could not go outside, I could not see my family, the emunah groups gave me a way to meet new people. Suddenly, my world was getting bigger. In our shul, there have been so many other ways that we've tried to maintain, and not just maintain, but actually broaden and deepen relationships over these past months. And so many people in our shul and wider community have taken this idea even further. There's a young woman in the shul who set up the little book exchange across from the library in Riverdale for people to find a good book that a neighbor might have enjoyed. There's the congregant who makes bread and soup every Friday afternoon and drops it off at the homes of members of the congregation, some of whom he did not know before the pandemic. There's the young man who sets up Zoom at each one of our weekday minyanim so that everyone can feel a part. They're the families who drop off food at the friendly fridge on Broadway for people in need. With all of this, I think a lot about the people who feel like they don't have anyone or anything solid to hold on to. As we head into the new year, I want you to ask yourself, could I be a support for someone else? And if the answer is yes, but you're not sure exactly what that could mean, give me a call because I have some ideas for you. Relationships can save us and our community. Recognizing the humanity of others, I think, is critical at another level. It's critical for our nation, for a strong, pluralistic, democratic America. Today, it can feel like we're all adrift, alone, afraid, and anxious. We hold on to our planks, but instead of seeing them as life preservers for ourselves, we use them as weapons, swatting at people with whom we disagree. Many have the fantasy that getting to shore is a zero-sum game. It'll either be me or it'll be you, but that's not the way it was supposed to be. Our Constitution starts with the words, we the people, we. In 2017, Britain's former chief rabbi, Jonathan Sacks, wrote something very ironic. This is the chief rabbi of England writing about one of the founding documents of our country. He wrote, "My favorite phrase in all of politics, a very American phrase, is we the people." Why we the people? Because it says that we all share a collective responsibility for our collective future. When we move from the politics of me to the politics of all of us together, we rediscover those beautiful counterintuitive truths that a nation is strong when it cares for the weak, that it becomes rich when it cares for the poor, it becomes invulnerable when it cares for the vulnerable. That is what makes great nations. Our founding fathers' vision of we was more limited than ours. Women and slaves were not included. But these words contain the seeds of a more expansive understanding that we have broadened with time. We must continue to grow as a nation that recognizes the humanity of all of its citizens, no matter the color of our skin, what we believe, the people we love, or how we vote. We need leadership that will hold us together, that will remind us that we are all in this water together. The same waves that will take me to shore will bring you to shore. We, the people, can make it together. Of course, relationships aren't a panacea for our national or our personal lives. Human connection will not cure the coronavirus, just as a plank cannot quiet the ocean. Connection can't bring back a loved one. As I said before, the personal problems that we struggled with before this virus are still with us, sometimes exacerbated by it. And relationships, they leave us open to being hurt. And having an honest relationship is complicated because as much as we're wired to connect, we also tend to disagree about things big and small. And all of that makes relationships messy and complicated. Toss on the fact that all of us are wired for different kinds of relationships, different kinds of human interaction. A friend once said that there are dog rabbis and cat rabbis. Cat rabbis need their time alone. They like to sit in their offices. Dog rabbis get energy from people. They like kiddush. Cat rabbis like kiddush too until they don't, and then they go back to their offices. And I've been told that people, even not rabbis, also fall into these broad categories as well. I am mostly a dog rabbi, and I think that's probably why I decided to stand on street corners in Riverdale blowing shofar for the past month. Over this month, hundreds of people came out of their apartments and their homes to just listen to the sounds of the shofar, the sound waves connecting us to each other, to memories of the past, to God. I did so at the beginning because I wanted people to hear the sound of the shofar, as is customary during the month of Elul. But I quickly realized that the moments of human connection that I had at those street corner shofar blowings, they filled me with hope that we can get through this, that we can make it to the shore. So what is your plank? What do you hold on to when the waves come? I love the end of the story from the Talmud when Rabban Gamliel and Rabbi Akiva are studying together. There's a sweet play on words in the original story. It says, Rabbi Akiva says that the thing that saved him, right, nizdamen li daf. A daf floated by, which is a plank, but daf is also the Hebrew word for a page, especially a page of the Talmud, the sacred texts. And so here they are studying a page of Talmud, holding on to a daf, that ritual of study can save them. And I imagine if they were like any other study partners they did, what study partners do, what you do in Chavruta is you study for a bit together, and then conversation starts to move to other things, to your lives, to what's going on. And I can imagine them talking about life. Rabban Gamliel and Rabbi Akiva were known to have some pretty deep disagreements over the course of their lives, but at this moment, none of that mattered. All that mattered was the invisible thread of connection that held them, that bound them to each other. Who brought you up? A plank from a boat came to me, and as each wave came, I nodded my head. V'chol gal v'gal shaba'alai, na'aneti lo Roshi. I'm ready for you, wave. Ready to rise and fall with the churning of the ocean. I will be patient and let the tide take me back to shore, back to my friend. The poet Langston Hughes wrote, The sea is a desert of waves, a wilderness of water. It can be. But we Jews, we know about getting through the wilderness. And when we have something to hold on to, when we learn how to respond to the waves, and if we're blessed with luck, it's a wilderness that we can and that we will cross together. I want to wish all of you a Shana Tova, just a good, sweet year for us, for our city, for our country, for the world. Shana Tova.